Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery preparing to check in on a couple of my European nightcrawler worm bins. Got some information here about them. They're 200 days old today, and even prior to them being moved into these two tubs that they live in today, almost a year now, we've been running this test of a compostable bag in bin number one. And even in their old home, the test had started over 400 days ago. I'm treating it as more just approaching 1 year at this point, though, because there was a period of inactivity that I deduct from the overall elapsed time. But these systems, I think they're ready for a feeding. It's been 11 days now since their last feeding, and in a lot of cases we might go a little bit longer than 11 days, but since today was their 200th day in service, it seemed like a fitting day to check in on them, give them a little meal. So we're going to get them up on the bench, and we're going to see how they're doing, and we're going to give them fed. So let's get to work. The meal plan for today includes a couple banana peels, one for each system, and a whole bunch of apple peel as well. So it looks like there's some Granny Smith, some Golden Delicious. Well, the only reason I know the names of the apples is because I'm usually the one that goes to the nearby farmer's market to pick up the apples for my mom when she wants to bake some stuff. So I'm bringing this out here as just a quick reminder that we do like to exclude the compostable bag from our routine check-ins and maintenance, and that's why we'll typically start right here in bin number one to get the compostable bag out and out of our way so we can proceed to checking in. So last time the compostable bag was placed on top of the last feeding, spread out across the top, not too far below the surface. So I'm going to see if I can extract it, get it out of our way, and then we'll be able to, I just felt something which seemed to me like something tearing by me kind of causing the tear with the force of my plowing through the material. So I know our last check-in included all kinds of paper, napkins, coffee filters, some reused cardboard that had been top coverings. There was just a huge assortment of different bedding materials that went into the last feeding. So I'm sure the worms really appreciated that. So I think what I've got here is the compostable bag. And you know, we've been hinting at maybe calling this test quits. And I think one of the more compelling comments I got from the viewers out there was from Anne, who said she saw one of these things sticking around, you know, I think well longer than the 1 year that it's been going here in my system. So I'm not opposed to keeping the test going. However, if these systems should reach their end at some point in the near future, which I think would probably happen sooner than this thing being gone, that might be the time to call this test a done deal and just call it off basically. So I'm just curious to see if people are kind of in the camp of agreeing with me, or are you more inclined to disagree and think that it's probably a better idea to continue the test? I don't know. I guess part of it that concerns me is the thing that just hasn't happened yet, which makes it all seem so strange, which is how the bag still seems to hold together as a single object and hasn't disintegrated into many little fragments. So I don't know. Doesn't that kind of send up a little bit of an alarm bell in your mind? I think it does for me. Might be just a clue as to the fact that it will just kind of stick together and perhaps look smaller, perhaps diminishing slightly over time, but for the most part probably needing some other process to, realize its supposed compostability claim. You know, in the past, these mango seeds have had a lot more worm activity for whatever reason. You know what? I think it's because it was wrapped inside this piece of paper accidentally. It wasn't put that way on purpose, but I think by freeing it here, we'll give it a better chance at seeing some worm activity again. So that was just a little mistake on our part, sending that yummy food item into isolation. I mean, one of those things takes forever on its own because of that thick husk it's got on the outside of it, so not too surprising. And over here in bin number 2, we typically just don't feel like we need to be as careful excavating down into the feeding area, since here we're not running any sort of a compostable bag test or anything. This is just a run-of-the-mill setup, and I guess perhaps it would be nice to just try to gather up some of the leftover bits of the bedding that were part of the last feeding. These little bits that you saw in the other system too, these are chunks of avocado pit sliced up into little pieces. There's a banana stem. Both systems had a good many chunks of cardboard included in their last feeding. This is a piece of corn cob. Very easy to break. Very slow to break down. Alright, have we gotten all the cardboard and bedding? Somehow it feels to me like no. Like there's probably still some floating out here. Not that collecting it all is terribly important. I just thought it would be interesting to see, because when I was piling it in here, it did, for certain, seem like a lot. You know, oops. Okay. Sending castings flying in all directions, but I think this is a little bit more what one would expect inside of a yummy seed like this. So let's continue. I figured if we would come away with today's check-in with the same impression that we got during the last check-in, which even made its way into the title of the last video, was the feeling that things were just way too damp. I think that was the way I even named the last check-ins video, that, you know, the European nightcrawler systems are just way too damp. So definitely good bit of moisture, but I think it does help a lot that we switched over to those cardboard coverings and decided to do away with plastic coverings last time. It does feel to me like things might be on the mend from a dampness perspective. I mean, I did wonder if I might want to use some sort of dry bedding, and I've got this stuff that I shredded up a whole bunch of white paper. And I was wondering if that might be a good thing to include. I totally forgot about it last time. After the fact, I thought to myself, you know, what if I just blended in a bunch of dry shredded paper? That might really help these systems, you know, become a little bit more cozy in terms of, well, cozy for me, I think, not as damp. So you know what, I'm going to get a little bit of that stuff and I'm going to sprinkle it in here with the feed. Here we go. This is the white shredded paper I was talking about, and you can see in a bucket it's almost full. Quite a bit of it here. So I thought that this stuff right here, going in dry, might be a nice thing to help us get to the objective of seeing a little bit less moisture here. We'll continue with the paper-only coverings instead of going back to plastic. That's really become kind of the norm in almost all of my systems, other than the ones that are still quite young. In the more mature systems, I believe plastic coverings have all but vanished on all my systems. So we just laid in some nice fresh bedding, so why don't we at least spice it up a little bit with a little bit of the food that we're coming in here with for them. A couple handfuls of apple and or pear. There might be pear in here too, not certain. And then the good old seed, which will take time for sure. And then, you know, why don't we get all the old bedding back in here as well while we're at it. This way there won't be any leftover little to-dos. We can just focus on backfilling and covering things up. And same thing over here. Get everything that we encountered along the way back down where all the excitement is expected to be, down in the feeding area. And here we're just going to be sort of introducing a few worms into the feeding area along with the frozen foods. Hopefully they don't get too upset about me doing that to them. So that's part of the rebuild. But you know, before we get too far off track, now over here, using a banana peel to me seems like a very good way to do it, which is to provide the worms with a little yummy foundation onto which we can put the test object. This does seem to me like them coming by to partake in this delicious banana will certainly aid in the breakdown, or at least one would hope that's the case. So it looks like we got about another handful for each system of yummy fruits going in. Now, I am very tempted just to come back in here with yet a couple more handfuls of this stuff. What do you think? I see no harm in doing this. It's going to look a little bit weird, I think. Once we start blending it in, perhaps after the next check-in, we'll start blending this stuff in. It'll get speckled throughout the entire system. Little bits of shredded paper everywhere, but you know, that doesn't matter. The worms definitely need their bedding, and perhaps by doing it this way we can see the bedding perform sort of a dual function, part of it now being to absorb some of what seems to me like a little bit of excess moisture. So that was a nice tilling up of the outer edge of bin number 2, where, as expected, seeing a lot of moisture. Definitely liking this opportunity to dislodge some of this material from itself and aerate it a little bit. I'm not going to go too crazy trying to make that happen, but at least some sort of a basic tilling up of the stuff that's down low and definitely very damp, and seeing if we can get it out to the surface where we know we're going to see a little bit more airflow now that we've covered up with paper instead of plastic. I think we're going to have a much nicer system here in both bins soon, once this stuff starts to become a little bit less clumpy, and to me just seems a little bit unmanageable this way. The systems are young enough at this point, though, to still be a-okay. It's not like we're going to try to harvest their castings anytime soon. If we were under the gun to do that, though, then we would probably be a little bit nervous, because material that's this damp and clumpy just is a little bit more difficult to manage and would probably add up to a little bit of a headache if the worms had to be separated from their castings, with the castings being like this. But for now, I think we're okay. The paper tops allowed for a little bit of drying, but very slow and steady, which I think is the way to do it in systems like this. So this here is one of the signs to me that the material's perhaps a little bit too damp. I had a comment in one of my other videos where a viewer suggested that their measure is also the same thing as, you know, a lot of stuff sticking to the glove. To me, seems to equate to perhaps a little bit too much moisture. So continued slow drying with paper covers, and now we're going to get to see, you know, how a whole bunch of dry bedding being included with the feeding does in terms of perhaps absorbing some of the moisture from the surrounding materials, further helping the system become perhaps a little bit more crumbly, a little bit more smooth flowing. That's kind of where I'd like to see things go in both of these bins. So let's see if we can get them covered back up sort of the way we found them. Doesn't have to be a terribly tight-fitting cover, if you ask me. Allowing for a little bit of airflow around the edges is sort of what we want anyway. So if that's happening here, then that's just fine. How do we get the coverage we're looking for? Just want to have these cool pennies sticking out. So yeah, these paper coverings were my homework last time. We didn't have them ready to go, so I covered up after the video ended. So now you get to see the fancy, colorful papers that I chose to cover up these systems. So that's pretty much it for our check-in, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.